Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Sarawak has long been pursuing more autonomy over education matters as stipulated under the Malaysia Agreement 1963. But with education inequity in the territories of East Malaysia among the highest when compared to nationally, will more decentralisation and autonomy help narrow that gap? This as we celebrate Sarawak Day on the 22nd of July, which marks the end of colonial rule and the birth of a self-governing Sarawak some 59 years ago. Joining us now is Deborah Dris. She is the group CEO of OB Group, which is the parent company to Owl and Badger Research, an independent research company based in Kuching, Sarawak. She was previously a secondary school teacher for 4 years as part of the Teach for Malaysia program. Deborah, welcome to the show. It's good of you to join us. So I understand it with Owl and Badger, you do a lot of work in terms of social research. You run focus groups, you are out there with communities all over Sarawak. My question is, what are you hearing when you work with them, when you meet with them? What are the conversations that are being had about the level of education, the state of education within the territory?
Right, thanks for the question, Melissa. Most of the work that we do, it's not really education focused. However, when we run our research activities on the ground, the topic of education seems to come up often among the communities that we visit. And of course, one of the biggest things that they mention is infrastructure. And also with waiting for instructions from the federal government, or not being able to make decisions or to take action because of certain requirements from the federal government. So because of the centralization, there are pros and cons, obviously, but because of the centralization, certain things cannot move faster than it should. And then, of course, there's the bigger or wider issue of the syllabus and the usage of languages as well in schools, because obviously the culture here in Sarawak is different. We have different communities, different ethnicities, different cultures. Even the culture in the southern region, Kuching, is very different from those in the north, in Miri, or even in Limbang and Lawas, and so on and so forth. So okay. I think, yeah.
So let me just pick up on a few things that you said there. So quite a number of things that we'll discuss throughout our conversation. But first of all, I do want to ask you, are you getting a sense of frustration or resentment or anger about the kind of lack of movement or the paralysis in waiting for federal government or central government to make these decisions some, thousands of miles away?
I think the frustration is there, definitely. We can't deny that. But at the same time, there's this attitude amongst us Sarawakians as it is what it is. So we just carry on and do what we can with what we have. Of course, there's pros and cons in that as well, right? We accept the situation and we carry on, but I think it's not fair to go on like this when, there's so many Sarawakians out there who are high achievers and they are not in Sarawak itself, right? They have left the state to pursue their dreams or their goals. And there's also many who wants to come back, but because perhaps the lack of opportunity, they can't return to Sarawak and contribute.
Okay, let's touch on the issue of infrastructure. You mentioned a little bit about that. I looked up some numbers, and I think most recent numbers that I could come across was about 565 schools that are categorized as dilapidated in Sarawak, yet to be repaired, still awaiting funds from federal. What is your sense of this? Is that something that you're seeing? Is this a common sight in schools in Sarawak, that buildings are old and require repairs?
I can't speak personally. I have seen schools that are dilapidated, but of course I'm not on the ground in schools all the time, so it's not fair for me to make a statement on that. However, yes, that data is true. Definitely, there are a lot of schools that are still dilapidated, but like I said before, this is because of the centralization and just waiting from the federal government. And of course, the government is not just tackling education issues. When it comes to infrastructure, you have to collaborate with other ministries as well. So it involves so many different stakeholders. It will definitely take some time. And to add on with the political situation as well, definitely there will be issues in um, having to solve these problems, right? So yeah.
You mentioned syllabus, the school syllabus. I know the national syllabus is a strong emphasis on Malay interests. I think also it seems to be that the curriculum is very rooted in the West Malaysia paradigm. What are the conversations being had about the things that children are learning in school, the subjects that they study, the content that they study? What are the conversations being had in Sarawak then?
I think for the most part, most people just accept the syllabus as it is for now. But of late, I think because of this rise in Sarawak nationalism, I would call it. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but more and more people are asking questions now, like why is there a lack of representation in our textbooks? Why are we not learning our own history? And there have been talk about people suggesting to write their own supplementary history to educate our younger generation in our schools. Because for now, most of our history is transmitted through oral learning or self-study or even our local museums. That's a good start for all of this information. But why should we only limit it to Sarawakians to learn about Sarawakian history? We should ensure that the entire country learns about Sarawakian history, because if we are one country, we should know about each other. Because if we don't know, then that will make the situation even worse. The gap will become bigger if we do not understand why are we so different, or what are the similarities actually that's happening between the regions.
Right. Well, it's been a while since I picked up a history textbook, but you were teaching history, I understand it, in secondary school not too long ago. When you were teaching, and as a Sarawakian, when you said you're not learning about Sarawak history, where are the gaps, Deborah, if I may? Where do you see? What would you like to see more of incorporated into not just the history syllabus, but across the curriculum?
I think they have made changes to the curriculum since I've last taught history in school. They did change, the Form 1 syllabus has changed already. I'm not sure about Form 4 and Form 5. But definitely for me, more history, more stories about our state heroes, our local heroes, especially women. I think there are a lot of people like the late Datuk Tra Zender, who fought for Gawai being a public holiday. These things are not mentioned there. And also about our different ethnic groups, because I often get mistaken when I go to West Malaysia. People still think I'm Kadazan when that's a Sabahan ethnicity. So people do get mixed up with this kind of terms. But I choose to believe that, give them the benefit of the doubt that it's not their fault. They didn't learn these things in school, or it's not no exposure to these things. So yeah, we should have more of a cross-cultural collaboration to ensure that everybody understands each other a bit more. It's not just Sarawakians being understood, but also I think Sarawakians, yes, we have, obviously because of the textbook and everything, we understand West Malaysians a bit more because of the context that's given. So perhaps there has to be a bit of a balance now towards understanding more of our East Malaysian brothers and sisters over here.
Right, I agree. There is an imbalance in the flow of knowledge. We know more about Malaya and Malaya's history as opposed to the territories of Sabah and Sarawak and the history, the rich histories there. What about, because you have a teaching background, I think I'm quite curious to know about the teaching staff. So there's often a discussion about lack of teaching staff or teacher absenteeism in Sarawak, and that contributes to, I guess, the education inequity. Is that something that you've heard of or observed in Sarawak?
Yes, definitely. I think there is a huge teacher shortage in Sarawak. If I'm not mistaken, I think there's like 3,000 over vacancies across both secondary and primary and secondary schools in Sarawak. And that has always been an issue. I believe teachers are paid allowance to go into these rural areas, but because the situation there, it's so remote, so not many people are willing to go there. And sometimes if they are posted there, some of them will leave after a few years, Because when you are in your first posting, usually you are sent somewhere that's not your home state. So yeah, I think the question is, how do we now attract teachers to teach in Sarawak? And I also acknowledge that there is that policy that was made by the Sarawak government, if I'm not mistaken, on the 90 to 10% ratio of teachers, where 90% of the teachers should be Sarawakian and 10% of teachers are not. I sadly, that also contributes to this issue.
Right.
I understand the idea behind this ratio. Of course, it has its benefits, but right now, when we are facing this teacher shortage issue, I think that should not be exercised too strongly for now while we transition into that policy. So yeah, we should be providing more opportunity to our locals or encouraging our local Sarawakians to become teachers, to elevate the teaching profession, to show that we need our own people, or we need teachers and good teachers and passionate teachers to teach our local students here.
May I ask you why you opted to enter the teaching profession, even though it was for a short while?
I just wanted to give it a try because I've always been curious about why is our education system as such, right? And why is teaching so hard? Why is it so difficult? Then I entered the system and now I realize, yeah, it's really not easy to be a teacher, especially in a government school setting. So I really commend all the teachers teaching. Yeah.
You and me both. My last question to you, Deborah, I do want to ask, to circle back to something you said in the beginning. You alluded to brain drain. Smart young Sarawakians who maybe don't have the opportunity or don't find the opportunity in their home state, and they leave to seek opportunities elsewhere, or they don't get the opportunity to leave. What are you hearing? I'm sure you must speak to young people all the time. How are they seeing their future in Sarawak? Are they hopeful for opportunities? I know many want to stay but have to leave out of necessity. What are the conversations you're hearing?
Right. So even personally, those around my age group, more than half are not in Sarawak. They're either in West Malaysia, Singapore, there's a lot of Sarawakians there, and also overseas. And these are like people who have gone to work as doctors, lawyers, dentists, really specialized group of people out there and all over the world. But there are also a group of people who want to come back with the new policies of digitalization and the promise of new industries coming in with hydrogen and all of that. I think with all these things coming in, the pull factor is there. But of course, it's not enough, because are we able to provide those opportunities? How do we? And also, when you move back from a big city to return to Sarawak, Kuching is, of course, it's a city, but it's nothing like KL, right? So how do you reconcile with changing your lifestyle and slowing down, or facing different problems that you face on the ground with having everything slowed down? I think that's one of the concerns as well. But right now, the biggest barrier to returning is the opportunity. Yeah.
Deborah, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Deborah Dris, there, Group CEO of OB Group. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We will be back with more. Stay tuned. Hi, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. Thank you so much for staying with the show. To mark Sarawak Day on the 22nd of July, the day that Sarawak achieved self-government with the end of colonial rule, tonight we're discussing the territory's pursuit for more autonomy over education matters, as stipulated under the Malaysia Agreement 1963. Now, will more decentralisation help Sarawak's education system? Joining us now is Professor Rusea She's from the Faculty of Science at University Putra, Malaysia. Professor Rusea, maybe you can begin by giving us a sense of how you see the education system in Sarawak and how it's progressed compared to the education system in some of the states in West Malaysia.
Hi, Hi, Melissa. Thank you for the introduction. Okay, I foresee, for example, in education, right? We are talking about education, inequality, and so on and so on. As for I'm this is on my personal basis, not from the university. So what I see, I'm from Sarawak. So definitely, I from the school, the rural school, for example, and all the things that I can see, the difference between Sabah and between Sarawak and also West Malaysia is very vast. Okay, the gaps are so huge, and you talk about inequality in education system. That is true. Okay, so that's very true. I may not be in Sarawak as physically, but I'm fully in touch with what is happening, especially in education, because I think and I know and I realize that education is the key for to improve from poverty to riches. Okay, let's say
Yeah.
riches,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I agree with you, and the data agrees with you. Let's take a look at literacy rates. Literacy being the first hallmark of, the first step of education. Sarawak's illiteracy rate is at 28%. Look at Sabah is 20. Sorry, Sarawak is 21%. Sabah is 28%. The peninsula is 2.7%. So something is clearly unequal if you're looking at illiteracy rates of more than 10 times in East Malaysia. Where do you think the system has failed, or the system of federal governance has overlooked the needs of Sarawak children in particular?
Okay, for this, we first look at the for Sarawak and Peninsular Malaysia. As far as the size of Sarawak itself is concerned, it's almost the size of Peninsular Malaysia. Okay, and definitely the number of schools will be probably uh, much more than one state in Malaysia, in Peninsular Malaysia, right? For Sarawak. So then again, there is the gap in terms of infrastructure. Okay, infrastructure is the most important basic thing for education. Okay, for example, that if you have a school, okay, that it don't have any rights to clean water, electricity, okay, then there is definitely something like more than 300% behind those in Peninsular Malaysia. Don't you think so, Melissa?
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned to a previous guest that some figures I came across was more than 500 schools in Sarawak categorized as dilapidated, requires urgent fixing. So if children aren't in environments that are conducive for learning, you can imagine what that does for their enthusiasm to continue learning. Can I ask you, Professor, about whether all those issues that you talked about, particularly with infrastructure, whether the state knows better, and whether decentralization of education matters might actually help expedite some of these problems being addressed?
Well, for my in my opinion, okay, right, that should be the way it goes, because if you look at the state government really knows where the lag is, and so on and so on, where the gaps are, and what are the things that need to be done, because they are in the and what you call it, they are at the site itself. Okay, so they in by giving the state autonomy. Okay, so we'll talk about autonomy, or more say into what is the need to be done to improve the infrastructure, or the tenaga kerja, I mean the teachers, as well as things like basic needs for learning. Okay, so that will give the much better improvement, or an aggressive kind of improvement for Sarawak. To me, that's because when you go from, there be a lot of red tapes if you go through federal, right?
Right.
If you do it in Sarawak, if Sarawak is given the autonomy, if Sarawak is given a bigger say in tackling the education, I think that will be a way to go for Sarawak. For example, I give you one example. Sarawak has their strong saying, and adopted the DLP, the dual language
Mm-hmm.
program, right? To me, that is a very good, brave, and what you call a good move. Okay, because if you want to conquer the global scenario, right, we have to use the global language. So there's one thing that is I'm very what you call it, I'm very happy for Sarawak for doing that. I really press the whoever that make that decision is something that I think is right to do.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the curriculum, because the curriculum has a very strong, the national education curriculum, strong emphasis on Malay interests, Malay subjects, and I think the previous our previous guest is a former history school teacher, and she talked about how there really isn't enough emphasis on the history of Sarawak. Is there other conversations being had about these missing areas in our national curriculum?
In terms of curriculum, I foresee that I've seen the history textbook. Okay, so there is almost none about Sarawak, about culture, about the history of Sarawak. Even not, and I don't think there is anybody mentioned that Sarawak had their what you call it, Merdeka, from the colonization on the 22nd of July. I was not told that when I was in school. I don't know anything about that. When I was in school, let's say, I was in school until 1985, by the way. So there you see that I'm really a veteran somewhere. But the thing is, there is a gap. The history books needs to be rewrite. Okay, because you in order to integrate the between Sabah, Sarawak, and also and Peninsular Malaysia and Malaya, for example, we have in that sense we have failed, because there's not much has been said.
Well,
Integration, but there's not much achieved.
Well, if I may cite the previous guest again, she mentioned how East Malaysia seems to know so much more about West Malaysia than vice versa. Sometimes Semenanjung people make the mistake about ethnicity and language and culture. I'm wondering what you think can be improved. How can the national education system do more to celebrate the cultural diversity that's so rich in the territories of Sarawak and Sabah?
Okay, for example, to me, it is more important for the basic knowledge to be inculcated into the system, right? So first of all, as I mentioned earlier, let's say we want to study geography, right? How much geography is there mentioned in terms of for Sarawak and Sabah? Okay, apart from Gunung Kinabalu and also Gunung Murut and so on. But there are other things that they don't know that about Sabah and Sarawak, as well as the culture, the ethnicity, and as well as cara hidup, and then all those things, right? Those are the things that we should incorporate into the curriculum. Okay, let's say I was called by MOE to talk about should we put an IBAN language curriculum, for example, right? So I said IBAN language is just about the was previously taught as a subject, as a language itself, but the language itself is not sufficient to conquer other subjects, right? In terms of science and technology, there's not much of language of IBAN words that can be used. We have to adopt from other language, from Bahasa Melayu or Bahasa Inggris, just to trying to explain things to the people what is all those things about. Okay, so those things are to me, we must inculcate, or must infuse all the things that is, of course, we cannot put all, right? But things that is basic to know. Let's say how many ethnics are there within the Dayak group, right? That's very basic, right? How many languages can a Dayak master or being able to speak? As far as Sarawak language, the Malay language, everybody can speak that. Okay, so those things are something that is not, the West Malaysian are not. They definitely the Bahasa Melayu is one language for them to speak over here. But then again, they don't know about Sabah and Sarawak as well. So they don't even, they know that they speak Malay, right? But they don't know the culture,
Yeah.
the rest of the thing, right?
Yeah.
So
Professor
is that
Rusea,
the,
thank Yeah, completely agree with you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I do want to thank you for sharing your insights with us today. Really appreciate your time. Professor Rusea, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris signing off for this evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.